What if your best English lessons didn't happen in a classroom, but while walking to the store, waiting in line, or wandering through the park? This episode reveals how to make every moment of your day a powerful English learning opportunity. Don't miss these surprising and powerful strategies. English on the move: how I learned while walking, waiting, and wandering. There was a time when I thought I needed a perfect environment to learn English. A quiet room, a desk, a dictionary, and a set of grammar books. But life rarely offers perfection. Most of our time is consumed by movement. Walking to the bus stop, waiting in lines, commuting, or even just pacing around the house. It wasn't until I realized that these in-between moments could become golden opportunities for learning that my English began to grow in ways I never imagined. Every step outside became a step closer to fluency. It started simply. I downloaded a few English podcasts to listen to during my 30-minute walk to work. At first, I didn't think I was learning much. The voices seemed fast, and I missed many words. But I kept walking and kept listening. After a few weeks, something magical happened. I started understanding more and more. My ears were adapting. My brain was catching patterns. I was learning naturally, like a child listens before they speak. Then I added a second layer to this habit. I began shadowing the speakers. As I walked, I would repeat short phrases out loud in a whisper, mimicking the rhythm and pronunciation. At first, I felt awkward. But, over time, my mouth adjusted to English sounds. I was no longer just learning vocabulary. I was training my voice, muscles, and confidence. Each walk became a speaking session, each sidewalk a classroom. Waiting in lines used to be boring. Now, they became review sessions. I opened flashcard apps, practiced vocabulary, or recalled sentences I heard earlier. Even 10-minute waits became productive. I realized that time was not my enemy. It was my hidden teacher. All I had to do was choose to use it. One of the most powerful moments came while wandering in nature. On weekends, I'd go for a walk in the park or forest, listening to an audiobook in English. The fresh air cleared my mind, and the words soaked in more deeply. I would pause the audio, repeat phrases, or even try to summarize what I'd heard in my own words. Speaking into the air, with birds and trees as my only audience, I gained more courage than I ever had in class. These small mobile moments added up. After a few months, my listening skills were sharper. I could understand YouTube videos without subtitles. My pronunciation was smoother. I started speaking without translating in my head. And the most beautiful part? I didn't spend extra time. I just transformed the time I already had. Many people believe they don't have time to learn English, but I say, look at your walking minutes, waiting minutes, commuting minutes. Those minutes are your hidden classroom. You don't need a desk or a textbook. You need headphones, curiosity, and consistency. Learning while walking also helped with memory. The rhythm of steps somehow matched the rhythm of language. When I moved my body, my brain moved too. I remembered words better when I heard them on the go. I created mental maps of English tied to physical places. The corner near my home where I learned nevertheless, the park bench where I heard fascinating, the shop queue where I repeated, could you please? I began collecting phrases from real life. Every time I heard a new expression in a podcast, I noted it. Later, while waiting at a red light or walking down a familiar street, I'd recall it and try to use it in a sentence. This repetition turned passive listening into active learning. It made English personal and alive. Of course, there were challenges. Sometimes I got distracted. Sometimes people looked at me strangely when I whispered English phrases to myself. But over time, I stopped caring. The benefits outweighed the awkwardness. I was making progress. I was owning my learning. Soon, I expanded the idea. Instead of only listening, I began recording myself during walks. I'd describe what I saw, how I felt, or what I learned that day, in English. These self-talk moments became practice in fluency and expression. I listened back, noticed mistakes, and improved naturally. My confidence grew with every step. My phone became my portable teacher. It had podcasts, dictionaries, translation apps, and note-taking tools. Wherever I went, English came with me. Even during short walks around the neighborhood, I reviewed idioms or recited dialogues from movies. I felt like I had a language gym in my pocket. Learning English on the move taught me one big lesson. Consistency beats intensity. You don't need to study for 3 hours once a week. You just need to use English for 10 minutes, 10 times a day. That's what walking and wandering gave me. Many small windows of practice that added up to real results. And you don't need to live in an English-speaking country to do this. Your city, your street, your routines, they can all become English zones. Just change what you hear. Replace music with podcasts. Replace silence with repetition. Turn passive time into active learning. Even sitting on a bus can become a pronunciation session. Just mouth words you hear in your audio, practice tongue twisters silently, or repeat difficult phrases until they feel natural. No one even needs to know. You're becoming fluent quietly, creatively, and efficiently. As days turned into weeks, I noticed something interesting happening in my mind. English was no longer something I switched on and off. It was becoming part of my daily rhythm. I would wake up and hear my inner voice thinking in English. Sometimes, I would even dream in it. The constant exposure during walks, commutes, and quiet moments had begun to shape my thought patterns. I wasn't just studying English anymore. I was living it. I remember once standing at a bus stop, watching the clouds move slowly across the sky. I listened to a podcast where someone was talking about finding beauty in the ordinary. The phrase struck me deeply. I repeated it out loud. Finding beauty in the ordinary. That became my motto for learning. I didn't need fancy classes or expensive materials. I just needed the world around me and a willingness to pay attention. My smartphone, once a source of distraction, had become a tool of transformation. I created folders of useful expressions. I saved short audio clips of native speakers using interesting intonation. I used spaced repetition apps to revise words while standing in line. These small steps were like watering a plant every day. Slowly but surely, my English roots grew deeper. Eventually, I started turning even non-English moments into opportunities. For instance, if I read a sign or advertisement in my language, I would try to mentally translate it into English. If I passed by someone talking in another language, I would imagine how I'd explain that situation in English. It was like playing mental games. And through those games, I was sharpening my ability to describe, to narrate, to express. There were times when I felt silly. Who talks to themselves while walking through a shopping center? But then I remembered a quote I once heard. You must be willing to look foolish in order to become brilliant. That line pushed me forward. I'd whisper vocabulary, explain things to imaginary friends, or rehearse future conversations. I also discovered the power of questions. Instead of just listening passively, I started asking myself things. What was the main idea of this story? Could I retell it in my own words? What vocabulary stood out? This made my listening sessions more active and engaging. I was not just consuming English, I was processing it. Even simple activities like grocery shopping became English practice. I would look at items and describe them in English. This apple is juicy and red. This bread smells fresh. This aisle is crowded. These little narrations helped me build fluency without pressure. No one was grading me. No one was correcting me. I was learning naturally, at my own pace. During moments of waiting, especially in queues, doctor's offices, or slow elevators, I practiced a technique called micro-dialogues. I imagined a short conversation I might have, like ordering coffee or asking for directions. Then, I played both parts in my head. Hi, can I get a cappuccino, please? Sure. Would you like sugar with that? No, thank you. Just as it is. These short scenes helped me prepare for real-life situations and reduced my anxiety. Over time, I became more comfortable with making mistakes. I realized that fluency doesn't mean perfection. It means flow. It means expressing yourself even when the grammar isn't perfect. My goals shifted from speaking like a native to being understood and confident. That shift released a lot of pressure and allowed me to enjoy the process more. I also began recording my progress. At the end of each week, I would make a voice memo summarizing what I had learned, which phrases I liked, and what I wanted to improve. Listening to earlier recordings was both funny and inspiring. I could hear my growth, notice improvements in pronunciation, and feel proud of how far I'd come. Walking also gave me space to reflect. As I moved, I thought about English differently. I stopped seeing it as a subject and started seeing it as a companion. It was always with me, in my ears, on my tongue, in my mind. And this constant presence made it feel less foreign. It became familiar. It became mine. There was one particular walk I will never forget. It was raining lightly, and I had no umbrella. I was listening to an episode about storytelling. The speaker shared how stories can shape memory. I paused the audio and began describing my walk aloud. The pavement is wet. My shoes are making a soft slapping sound. There's a dog barking in the distance. The rain smells like the earth. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer thinking about English. I was simply using it to feel, to observe, to be present. That is what real fluency is. Not just speaking correctly, but thinking freely. I encouraged my friends to try this method. Some laughed, some doubted, but a few joined me. We formed a little walking club where we would each go for solo walks, record ourselves talking in English, and then share the recordings. We gave each other feedback, encouraged progress, and celebrated wins. It wasn't competitive. It was joyful. One of my friends said something beautiful. Every sidewalk is a sentence. Every step is a syllable. That stuck with me. It reminded me that language is motion. We don't learn it all at once. We learn it word by word. Just like we walk one step at a time. Eventually, I no longer needed reminders. My brain had developed the habit. When I walked, I naturally switched to English. It became a lifestyle, not a task. I looked forward to my walks, not just for exercise, but for learning, reflection, and peace. Sometimes, I would pass by children playing and imagine how to describe their game in English. Or, I'd watch a street musician and silently craft a story about them. English had given me new eyes. It made the world more vivid, more interesting, more poetic. As I improved, I noticed how my listening comprehension had reached a new level. I could catch jokes, sarcasm, even cultural references. This came not from textbooks but from exposure, real, raw, and regular. The outside world had become my curriculum. In those quiet walks and noisy streets, I found my voice. I learned that learning doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need applause. It just needs honesty, effort, and love. Now, whenever someone tells me they don't have time to learn English, I smile gently. I tell them about my walks. I tell them about waiting in lines, wandering aimlessly, and whispering phrases into the wind. I tell them that time is not the problem. How we use it is. By the time I reached the 3rd month of practicing English while walking, waiting, and wandering, I began to notice not just progress in my language skills, but a change in my overall mindset. My attention to detail increased. I listened more carefully, not only to English but to everything around me. The world became richer, more layered, more alive. This heightened awareness, surprisingly, made me a better communicator, even in my native language. I began experimenting with describing emotions in English. Instead of saying, "I'm tired," I would think, "I feel drained today, like my energy is dripping away." This exercise forced me to stretch my vocabulary and made my self-expression more precise. It was like painting with more colors. I even started journaling these emotional observations, writing short paragraphs about my mood, the weather, or the people I passed. When I walked in a park, I described the trees, the birds, the way the light played on the leaves. I stopped to feel textures and guess their English names: rough bark, soft petals, slippery stones. Sometimes, I'd Google the names later to check my guesses. This turned every walk into an adventure in language. It was immersive, but gentle. I wasn't pushing myself. I was inviting English into my experience. One day, while sitting at a cafe, I noticed how people ordered drinks. I imagined myself being one of them. I whispered polite phrases. "Could I have a latte, please?" "No sugar, thank you." I added variations. "Can I get that to go?" Or, "Do you have almond milk?" Practicing these dialogues in real-life settings prepared me for actual interactions. And when the day finally came that I had to order coffee in English, it felt like I had already done it 100 times. Repetition in different contexts was key. I realized that learning phrases wasn't enough. I needed to hear them, say them, use them in many places. The phrase, "It's up to you," meant one thing in a podcast, but another when I said it to myself while choosing between 2 paths during a walk. Language came alive when it was part of real choices and feelings. To deepen my connection with English, I began listening to audiobooks during long walks. Fiction, especially with strong characters and dialogue, helped me absorb conversational patterns. Sometimes I would pause, repeat a sentence, and mimic the tone. I would even guess what a character might say next. This guessing game trained my intuition and made listening more interactive. As days passed, I developed a ritual. Before each walk, I'd pick a theme: food, travel, emotions, work. Then, during the walk, I'd try to describe everything I saw or felt using that theme. For example, on Food Day, I'd name every item I passed that was edible or related to eating. On Emotion Day, I'd describe the feelings of people I saw based on their facial expressions or body language. This thematic learning kept things fresh. It prevented boredom and helped me group vocabulary mentally. I wasn't just learning random words. I was organizing them into categories. This made retrieval easier during conversations. My brain built connections, not just lists. Another turning point was when I recorded myself reading out loud. I started with short articles or podcast transcripts. At first, I cringed at my voice, but over time, I noticed improvements in clarity, speed, and confidence. Comparing my recordings from week to week became a powerful motivator. I wasn't just feeling better, I had proof I was getting better. Then came an unexpected bonus: improved pronunciation. By mimicking native speakers during my walks, I picked up intonation patterns. I began to hear the melody of English, the rhythm, the pauses. I learned when to stretch a word and when to drop a sound. This musicality helped my speech become more natural, less robotic. I also noticed my vocabulary expanding in unexpected directions. One day, I learned overcast from a weather app. The next day, I heard it in a podcast. Then, I used it in my journal. Seeing the same word in different contexts solidified its meaning. It was no longer just a word, it was part of my story. My walking sessions became sacred. Rain or shine, I showed up. Sometimes tired, sometimes excited, but always willing. I kept my phone light, only carrying what I needed: audio, a dictionary app, and my recording tool. No distractions, just the road, my thoughts, and English. I remember one walk during a windy afternoon. I closed my eyes for a second and let the wind brush my face. Then I described the moment. The wind pushes gently against my cheeks. It whispers secrets in my ears. Leaves scatter like dancing butterflies. That poetic English didn't come from a textbook. It came from presence. Eventually, I began connecting English to my goals. If I had a dream to travel, I'd imagine myself explaining my itinerary to someone. If I wanted to start a business, I'd rehearse elevator pitches in English. These dreams gave my practice purpose. It wasn't just about grammar or tests. It was about unlocking doors. One weekend, I volunteered as a helper for international tourists at a local festival. I was nervous, but I told myself, "You've been preparing for this. You've been walking for this, speaking for this." And I did well. I greeted visitors, answered questions, gave directions. My hands shook, but my sentences flowed. That moment was proof that walking with English had led me somewhere real. From then on, I saw opportunities everywhere. A YouTube comment became a chance to write. A tourist asking for help became a chance to speak. An English song became a lesson in culture. My life was no longer separate from my learning. They had merged beautifully. I shared this method in an online group. Some people dismissed it. "That's too slow," they said. But others tried it, and they blossomed. They messaged me weeks later, saying, "I've never felt so connected to English." That was the real reward. Not just my progress, but seeing others grow. To make the journey sustainable, I created a log. Every walk, I noted the date, duration, what I listened to, what I practiced. Over time, this became a journal of growth. Flipping through it reminded me of how far I had come and how far I could go. If you're reading this and thinking, can I really improve my English while walking or waiting? The answer is yes. But it's not just about walking. It's about attention, intention. It's about turning ordinary moments into extraordinary opportunities. The world doesn't need more rushed learners. It needs more mindful ones. People who slow down, observe, feel, and reflect. And that's exactly what I had become. Not just a language learner, but a mindful explorer of words and worlds. The final stages of my journey felt less like climbing a mountain and more like floating down a river. Everything had begun to flow naturally. I no longer needed to remind myself to practice. English simply became a part of my environment, like the air I breathed or the ground I walked on. The effort had turned into habit, and the habit had evolved into identity. I started experimenting with storytelling more often. Every walk became a story in motion. If I passed a bakery, I would make up a dialogue. "Excuse me, do you have any fresh croissants today?" "Yes, just baked this morning." These imaginary exchanges sharpened my speaking rhythm. I was no longer afraid of how I sounded. I was focused on clarity, tone, and feeling. I began talking to myself deliberately. I would describe my emotions in English. If I felt anxious, I'd say, "I feel a little nervous today because I have a lot on my mind." If I felt excited, I'd say, "This morning feels full of possibilities." Naming emotions in English helped me gain emotional fluency, not just language fluency. One of my favorite exercises became describing memories. I'd recall a scene from my childhood and try to narrate it in English as if telling a friend. When I was 8, my grandfather took me fishing. We sat by the river, the air was warm, and the sun sparkled on the water. It was like time traveling through words. Not only did it improve my tenses and descriptions, but it also made learning deeply personal. Some days, I used photos to spark language. I'd scroll through old pictures and describe them in English. This was my cousin's wedding. Everyone looked so joyful. The bride wore a traditional dress with golden patterns. It reminded me that English wasn't just about learning vocabulary. It was about expressing the life I had lived. I even brought this habit into nature. On hikes or forest walks, I describe my surroundings. "The path is narrow and covered in leaves. There's a soft breeze coming from the north. Birds are chirping in the distance." Nature became a textbook. Its pages were endless, and every sound was a word waiting to be translated. Over time, the world became an English classroom. Street signs, menu boards, billboard ads, overheard conversations, all became lessons. I carried a small notebook to write down anything interesting. I labeled objects in my house with sticky notes. My fridge said refrigerator. My mirror said reflection. My window said perspective. The more I did this, the more fun it became. I started enjoying English not just as a means to an end, but as a friend who walked with me everywhere. It wasn't about perfection. It was about connection to people, to stories, to places, and most importantly, to myself. One day, I received a phone call in English. It was a customer service representative. I handled the entire call without switching to my native language. When I hung up, I stared at my phone in disbelief. I had done it. I had navigated a real-life situation, calmly and confidently. This small moment felt like winning a medal. I rewarded myself with coffee and a quiet walk. During that walk, I reflected. Progress in English isn't loud or dramatic. It's in the tiny victories, the moment you understand a joke, the time you explain a recipe in English, the day you stop translating in your head. I also started helping others. I shared my techniques online. I made short audio journals and posted tips. I found joy in showing others that learning could be gentle and joyful. No pressure, just practice. No judgment, just curiosity. Sometimes I'd walk through crowded places and listen to English conversations in podcasts. I trained my ears to catch slang, accents, idioms. I paused and repeated phrases. I'd write down expressions like cut to the chase or hit the nail on the head, and then try to use them later in my day. I realized that learning English through movement wasn't just effective. It was liberating. I wasn't tied to a desk. I wasn't dependent on classes. I was my own teacher. My city was my school. My steps were my syllabus. One evening, while watching the sunset, I whispered to myself, "Thank you, English, for walking with me." It might sound silly, but I meant it. This language had given me new vision. It had opened windows to other worlds. It had made me curious, courageous, and consistent. I started a tradition. Every Sunday, I took a long walk and made a voice recording in English. I talked about my week, my thoughts, a story I heard, a phrase I learned. These recordings became a kind of diary, and over time, they became a legacy of learning. Even during bad days, I kept walking. If I was frustrated, I'd speak it out. "I'm tired today, but I'm still trying." If I was uninspired, I'd say, "Maybe I don't have much to say today, but this too is part of the journey." Honesty in language is as important as grammar. Eventually, I reached a point where I wasn't afraid of English. I didn't worry about long words or strange accents. I had built a relationship with the language. It knew me, and I knew it. Looking back, I realized that walking, waiting, and wandering were not distractions. They were the perfect conditions for quiet, consistent, powerful learning. And anyone, anywhere, can use them. If I could give one piece of advice to every English learner, it would be this. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for a classroom. Start walking and let English walk with you. Speak to yourself. Describe your world. Reflect on your journey. Every step is a sentence. Every breath is a lesson. Learning on the move teaches you something precious. That language is not just about speaking, it's about living. It's about making English a part of your story, step by step, moment by moment, day by day. So go ahead, put on your shoes, put in your earphones, and let English be your companion. Not for an hour, not just during study time, but always, with every step, every pause, and every quiet whisper that says, "I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm becoming." And as I close this journey, I invite you to try it for yourself. Walk with English, talk with English, think in English. Let it become your companion, not your challenge. Every step you take can bring you closer to fluency, if only you allow it. Remember, you don't need more time. You need a new way to use the time you already have. Happy walking and happy learning.